Well, hello and welcome to worship here at Newtown Congregational Church, United Church of Christ for this Sunday, October 16th, 2022. I'm Reverend Matt Krebin and we're glad you're worshiping with us online. We have a number of announcements for you to be aware of things that are happening in our congregation. One is that our shrimp boil and barbecue Fest is happening in just a week's time, and you want to get your order in ASAP so you can make sure you get all that delicious food. This, of course, is a dinner next Saturday in support of Back Bay Mission down in Biloxi, Mississippi, a wonderful ministry that we've been partnered with for a number of years. Back Bay Mission is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year, and you'll be able to learn a little more about that if you join us in person. But also you can place an order and pick it up so you don't have to miss out on those food if for some reason you can't join us in person. The other announcements that we have is that this week and next week we'll be taking our Neighbor in Need offering, which is a special offering in the United Church of Christ. It supports local church ministries, local church programming, and local church leadership, and helps to make a difference in the lives of our other sibling churches throughout the United States, and makes a difference in particularly making possible ministries that affect local outreach and care and support both within congregations and beyond their walls, right in their own neighborhoods. So if you want to make a contribution, you can do that online or send in an offering to the church. There'll be a little more information about that a little later in our service. Also today, on this Sunday, we'll be passing out Bibles for some of our children and youth to have the opportunity to have a Bible. It's a tradition in our Protestant stream of life together that we want everybody to be able to have access and be able to read a Bible that's appropriate for them. So for our kindergarteners and for our third graders and also for our ninth grade confirmands, we have Bibles. But if for some reason you have a family member who fits into one of those categories, or even if they're a little bit older but they missed out on getting a Bible, let us know at the church office, because we want to make sure that, that any of our children and youth who would like to have a Bible have one that is just for them. And that's just part of our ministry. So those are our announcements for right now. We're going to continue this week with our theme for the month, which is help. We're going to be having a Wellsprings gathering after worship today. But you'll be getting a little bit of our theme about help and about how Jesus can make a difference. And how we understand our relationship to God in this dynamic of so often where maybe we feel like we're, especially today, our theme is around how do we, when it feels like the world around us is chaotic, how is it that God works in and through us and surrounds us with grace and love, and what does that look like? And we'll talk more about that a little later in our service. Well, let's continue with our worship right now.
Stop my way, thou who savest all and silence, stand by me.
The gospel story we're going to hear a little later in our service is the story of Jesus sleeping in a boat. And there's a storm, and the disciples ask him for help. And they say, what's going on? You're asleep, and we feel like we're in trouble. And Jesus tells them, oh, ye of little faith. And we'll talk more about that in our message. But one of the things that story reminds us of is that we're not just asking God for prayers, but I think when Jesus talks about faith, he's talking about your partners. And don't you recognize how you don't have to be overwhelmed by the chaos because of who you are? And yet they turn right to him. And we'll talk more about that in our service. But I think for our prayer life, sometimes we have to remember our prayer life is God empowering us through our prayer life to be more fully who we are, to help us to realize how we share grace and love and how we are a part of that, how we are in the midst of that in the stream of God's grace and love that moves in and through us, that we're connected to that. So it's not just a list of us saying to God, help us, God, we have all these issues and you need to take care of them. It's us saying, God, we know that there are all these things that are challenging going on in our lives and for people we love and in our world, and we have anxiety and we need help. But what we're asking for in your help is deeper than just, here's our checklist and you take care of it. It's us praying to be open to God's leading. And today's prayer is going to look at that chaos that is a part of our lives and invite God to be moving in and through that chaos. So let's gather with prayer. Ever-present God, thank you for being here with us right now in the chaos of our lives. We often forget that you are always with us, always seeking to bring us peace. When we feel overwhelmed as if the world around us is a heaving and crashing sea, and we are adrift in a small boat, unable to keep the waves from closing over us. Help us to remember deep within our beings that you are able to bring order out of this chaos. That you speak words of grace and peace, O Holy One, and the seas of every kind are calmed. And we who seek you, discover that you are indeed our help and our safety. Even as we say these words, we can hear how foolish they might sound. For you are the God of our lives. And you are also the God of order, the God of grace, the God of sustaining love. So bring order into our lives, and in doing so, take care of those concerns that rise up around us like storm waves. Calm the seas of our busyness, still the waters of our doingness. Let us drift on the gentle swells of your love and your care. God, we pray with open hearts and open minds that those who are ill in mind or body or spirit might know your compassion and grace. That all that brings us anxiety and stress, all that causes us to feel like we are in chaos is stilled by your presence within and among us. Trusting in those promises, O God, we pray for our world, a world that feels itself so chaotic at times, that your peace might be made known near and far. Hear these our prayers in the name and spirit of Christ, the one who taught us to pray always saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
a servant, humble and meek. Lord, let me lift up those who are weak, and may the prayer of my heart always be, make me a servant, make me a servant, make me a servant today. Make me a servant, humble and meek. Lord, let me lift up those who are weak, and may the prayer of my heart always be, make me a servant, make me a servant, make me a servant today.
Scripture reading for today comes from the Gospel of Luke. It is found in the 8th chapter. And this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is the story of Jesus getting in a boat with his disciples from a place of familiarity and going to a place that we'll discover is a place where there are described here in the scriptures demonic presence. There's actually a man, we're going to hear part of that story too, a man who is filled with multiple demonic spirits. Legion is what they're called. And in some ways, the story of Jesus crossing over on the boat is the story of heading into a place where there is chaos present, where human beings of all kinds experience and don't know what to do with the chaos. And the storm itself becomes a place of chaos, and disciples don't know what to do, and they ask Jesus. And we'll talk a little more about that afterwards. But this is an important context for the story, that this story of the boat, and that's why we're including a little bit of the story afterwards, is told in this context. And Jesus has come from a place where he's been teaching parables and helping people to understand how they're a part of God's realm, how they're participants in this, if they're hearing the word that he's been teaching. So let's hear this story. This is Luke chapter 8, verse 22 through 31. One day he got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, "Let's go across to the other side." So they put out, and while they were sailing, he fell asleep. A gale swept down on the lake, and the boat was filling with water, and they were in danger. And they went to him and woke him, shouting, "Master, Master, we are perishing." And he woke up and rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and they ceased, and there was calm. And he said to them, "Where is your faith?" They were afraid and amazed, and said to one another, "Who is this then, that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him?" Then they arrived at the country on the other side, which is opposite of Galilee. And as he stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time that man had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirits to come out of the man. Here ends our reading. May God add understanding to these God's holy words. Okay, just let's capture a little bit of this story if we can and understand it. I think why Luke is telling us, this is a common story. Actually, it's told in both Matthew and Luke also have versions of the story, Jesus calming the storm. But here in Luke, as I mentioned, Jesus has gotten into a boat on the side of Galilee, which is familiar territory for him. It's a place where, and for his disciples, they're there. And as is the case in the other stories that are told in Matthew, like the same story, there is this movement from the familiar place, the place of Galilee, the place where, it's kind of like your hometown, home region, if you will, And the disciples are from Galilee, and here they are heading across the lake to this other side. And if we done a little more conversation about that, we would know that that's like a Gentile side. It's not not a side of kind of believers. There's going to be challenges there, and in fact, when the story is told, one of the ways we can understand the story being told is that the storm on the water is itself a metaphor for the demonic and chaotic forces that stand against God's realm. Jesus has been teaching about the realm of God, and on the side before he leaves. He teaches in parables. What is the realm of God like? It's like this. It's like a parable of the sower. It's all these things, and right before he goes, he says, here's brothers and brothers. And he says, who are my brothers and sisters? They're the ones who do what I've been about, who are about what I'm doing, who share God's realm, who are participants in it. It's not about just blood. It's about this deeper connection to living out the power of the Spirit. And thus, hopefully, that may help us, because we get to the storm, and so Jesus falls asleep, and the disciples are like, oh my God, we're going down, the boat's sinking, what are we going to do? Jesus, wake up, don't you, they say, Master, we're perishing, what are you, and of course, what does he say? He says, where's your faith? Interesting, right? Like they're perishing. And so what is he saying here, faith? Some people, some Christians, for years interpret this story and say, oh, he's saying, where's your faith in me? Right? Or your faith just in God. But he doesn't. He says, where is your faith? Remember, Jesus has invited the disciples to be a part of building God's realm, of facing the chaos that is present in the world, the chaos of illness, where people are sick and facing death and being pushed out of their communities and doing all sorts of stuff. So I think, and other scholars, agree with me, and others don't, but I think Jesus, when he says, where's your faith? He's not talking about, where's your faith in me? Because I get up and I calm the storm. See? Ha! But really, where's your faith? You have the power to deal with the chaos. Because you are part of God. It's not just you have power because anybody can do it, but because you're a part of what we're about, what we've been about, what I've been teaching. You've been entrusted with the power to deal and face down the chaos. Right? Not just because, you just be strong and get and beat that chaos, but because you're a part. You're a part of this grace and love. You're a part of the building of God's realm. You've learned about these things. You've seen how I heal and everything else. You're a part of that. So if the faith, the question is here is, why do you wake me up? Why do you wake me up? Why do you not trust in yourselves? Why do you not trust in not just yourselves, but in yourselves who are held in God's grace and mercy? Why do you think it has to be just about me? And he calms the storm. And then they get to the other side. And as a continuation of the chaos, when people are saying, help, 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 there's more chaos. Here we meet the archetype of chaos. Here is a man, if we'd read further along, he's not just possessed by one demon. He's possessed by multiple. In fact, the name is Legion. There's so much chaos going on in this man, and nobody in his country knows what to do. They try to chain him up. But he's running around naked, and he's in the... he's in the tombs, he's in the cemetery, and people don't know what to do with him. He's all chaos. And what does Jesus do? What Jesus is about? Offering help in the midst of that chaos. That this chaotic sense, probably the ultimate epitome of chaos. You come to the storm where it's chaos. You come to this man who is like the archetypal figure of chaos, and Jesus is healing him as, again, sign and symbol and representation of how being a part of God's realm, being a part of this building of God's realm, is facing the chaos that we fear, the chaos that we don't think we can take, and realizing that God enables us to remain calm in the midst of the chaos. Right? And it's trusting that and being aware of both, not just trusting, like I trust God, but being aware that God's grace, God's Spirit of joy, of hope, of love, that help is there for us always. It's not, so often we kind of get this, well, how do I get God's help? Just help me, we have to know, well, I'll ask for God for help when I go to church on Sunday and worship, or, when I do this or not. Anne Lamott, who we're reading, her book, which is Help, Thanks, and Wow. We're reading it as a congregational read. And most of you know that by now, but if you don't, you can get the book. We still have some available at the church office. Anne has this thing where she says, help is a prayer that is always answered. And here I don't think she's talking about like just, hey, help me God, and it takes care of you. Help me God, I'm out of gas. Fill me up, fill up my tank. Right? No, help is always, because God is there for us, is what she's saying. God is present to us in all things. It doesn't matter how you pray, she says. This is how help is too. With your head bowed in silence, or crying out in grief, or dancing. Churches are good for prayer, but so are garages, and cars, and mountains, and showers, and dance floors. Years ago, I wrote an essay that began, "Some people think that God is in the details, but I have come to believe that God is in the bathroom." So here, the idea is that God is present everywhere with us, right? And that presence of grace can assist us in dealing with whatever feels like chaos or going on around us. It's not that God is kind of waiting at our beck and call for this prayer of help, right? That God is kind of saying, well, if only they would just say help, I'd come down there and take care of them, right? It's rather that God is present to us always. And thus our help is there, and we are part of that. We are present through that grace of God, that we also then can be instruments of helping folks navigate through the chaos of their lives. We don't just have to say, well, God will take care of that. What we do is say, yep, God says we're all in this together. And so with God, as a servant of God, I'm going to assist in what ways I can to help people navigate through this chaos and know that we are full participants with God in the work of providing help, right? Chaos is, Jesus said, we're going to get in the boat, we got to go to the other side. I want to go to the other side. Right? So this is the other thing, is Jesus didn't kind of say, oh, it's chaotic over there. You guys, I don't know how you're going to deal with that. No, Jesus said, we need to go to the other side. We need to face. We can't just be comfortable in our own setting, right? You guys are really, you could have said, he could have known, like these guys, hey, they're really comfortable in Galilee. They're used to Galilee. What, are you going to go over with the foreigners? You're going to go to this, across the lake where it's really open water, and there's all kinds of problems that could happen. Why don't we just stay here, right? But that's not. So sometimes God is also the one that summons us out of the chaos, into the chaos, so that something else can happen. Anne Lamott has this great thing. She says, if we stay where we are, where we're stuck, where we're comfortable and safe, we'll die there. We become like mushrooms living in the dark with poop up to our chins. If you want to know what you already know, you're dying. You're saying, leave me alone. I don't mind this little rat hole. It's warm and it's dry and it's fine. When nothing new can get in, it's death. When oxygen can find a way in, when oxygen can't find a way in, you die. But new is scary. New can be disappointing and confusing. And we had this all figured out, and now we don't. New is life, she says. And that's the thing. Jesus knew that for these disciples, the new that they had to go face might feel like chaos. We're going to get in the boat, and we're going to go to the other side. And there's going to be chaos. It's going to feel like chaos, especially. And you're going to think, because it's new and it's strange. And, and that can cause this kind of upheaval of things. And yet that's what we need. So it's interesting, isn't it? It's not just that God is like, I'm all order and there's no chaos. No, sometimes God pulls us out of where we are and we have to go out and face the chaos in order to have fullness of life, in order to be about what God needs us to be about. So we shouldn't also fear the chaos, right? God is there to help us in the chaos, but God is also sometimes saying, I'm helping you get into the chaos so that something new can be brought to life through you and with you and for you. All right. In fact, the author Toni Morrison has this great quote. She says, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom. Sometimes we need the chaos because that's where we're going to find knowledge. And that's where we may even gain wisdom. We may not even choose that chaos sometimes. It's not like we always go looking for the chaos. But sometimes in the midst of chaos, in the midst of what feels like, oh, it's unmanageable, what are we going to do? Well, in the midst of that, God can work and help us to gain wisdom. Help us to really find new life. So we shouldn't fear chaos. We shouldn't think that once we're in chaos that somehow something's wrong. Maybe chaos is where we were called to be for a bit of time, but that's okay. Because God's with us in the chaos, right? That's what Jesus said. You have faith, don't you know? The boat's going up and down. It's not just me asleep and you got to wake me up to help you. God's with us in this. And if God's moving in and through you, you yourselves have the ability to navigate through this chaos. Well, that's what I'm thinking today. And so as we leave, I'm going to send you off with a little benediction here I have. This benediction comes from Jan Richardson. It's a great one, I think, for our theme today. So it goes like this. To all that is chaotic in you, let there come silence. Let there be a calming of the clamoring, a stilling of the voices that have laid their claim on you, that have made their home in you, that go with you even to the holy places, but will not let you rest, will not let you hear your life with wholeness or feel the grace that fashioned you. Let what distracts you cease. Let what divides you cease. Let there come to an end that which diminishes and demeans, and let depart all that keeps you in its cage. Let there be an opening into the quiet that lies beneath the chaos, where you find the peace that you did not think possible, and see what shimmers within the storm. Go in peace, my friends. Amen.